So for those of you visiting with us today, we've been going through 1st and 2nd Kings lately, and we're in 2nd Kings right now, chapter 5. I would encourage you to turn there. I'm going to read it from the New Living Translation rather than the English Standard that I normally do. It's just a little easier reading, probably a little easier for you to follow. So this is 2 Kings chapter 5. This is Naaman here. He's getting ready to go under, probably for the first time because his hair's still dry there. But that's the picture depicting. So the king of Aram had great admiration for Naaman, the commander of his army, because through him the Lord had given Aram great victories. But though Naaman was a mighty warrior, he suffered from leprosy. At this time, Aramean raiders had invaded the land of Israel, and among their captives was a young girl who had been given to Naaman's wife as a maid. One day, the girl said to her mistress, "I wish my master would go to see the prophet in Samaria. He would heal him of his leprosy." So Naaman told the king what the young girl from Israel had said. "Go and visit the prophet," the king of Aram told him. "I will send a letter of introduction for you to take to the king of Israel." So Naaman started out carrying as gifts 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter to the king of Israel said, "With this letter I present my servant Naaman. I want you to heal him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes in dismay and said, "Am I God that I can give life and take it away? What is this man asking me to heal someone with leprosy? I can see that he's just trying to pick a fight with me." But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes in dismay, he sent this message to him: "Why are you so upset? Send Naaman to me, and he will learn that there is a true prophet here in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elisha's house. But Elisha sent a messenger out to him with this message: "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored and you will be healed of your leprosy." But Naaman became angry and stalked away. "I thought he would certainly come out to meet me," he said. "I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of the Lord his God and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus, the Abana, and the Pharpar better than any of the rivers of Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed?" So Naaman turned and went away in a rage. But his officers tried to reason with him and said, "Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him when he says simply, 'Go and wash and be cured.'" So Naaman went down to the Jordan River, dipped himself 7 times, and as the man of God had instructed him, and his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, and he was healed. Then Naaman and his entire party went back to find the man of God. They stood before him, and Naaman said, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel, so please accept a gift from your servant." But Elisha replied, "As surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept any gifts." And though Naaman urged him to take the gift, Elisha refused. Then Naaman said, "All right, but please allow me to load 2 of my mules with earth from this place, and I will take it back home with me. From now on, I will never again offer burnt offerings or sacrifices to any other god except the Lord. However, may the Lord pardon me in this one thing. When my master the king goes into the temple of the god of Rimmon to worship there and leans on my arm, may the Lord pardon me when I bow too." "Go in peace," Elisha said. So Naaman started home again. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said to himself, "My master should not have let this Aramean get away without accepting any of his gifts. As surely as the Lord lives, I will chase after him and get something from him." So Gehazi set off after Naaman. When Naaman saw Gehazi running after him, he climbed down from his chariot and went to meet him. "Is everything all right?" Naaman asked. "Yes," Gehazi said, "but my master has sent me to tell you that 2 young prophets from the hill country of Ephraim have just arrived. He would like 75 pounds of silver and 2 sets of clothing to give to them." "By all means, take twice as much silver," Naaman insisted. He gave him 2 sets of clothes, tied up the money in 2 bags, and sent 2 of his servants to carry the gifts to Gehazi. But when they arrived at the citadel, Gehazi took the gifts from the servants and sent the men back. Then he went and hid the gifts inside his house. When he went into his master, Elisha asked him, "Where have you been, Gehazi?" But he said, "I haven't been anywhere," he replied. But Elisha said, "Don't you realize that I was there in spirit when Naaman stepped down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to receive money and clothing, olive groves and vineyards, sheep and cattle, male and female servants? Because you have done this, you and your descendants will suffer from Naaman's leprosy forever." When Gehazi left the room, he was covered with leprosy. His skin was white as snow. Quite the story, huh? Naaman was everything that this world would consider successful. He was the commander of the army of the king of Syria. He was highly favored. He was a mighty man of valor. And through him, the Lord had given victory to Syria over several of their enemies. And yet the text in verse 1 ends with these devastating words: he was a leper. He was a leper. Success, military status, military power, royal favor, none of that could touch the one thing that really defined Naaman and really limited him in life: leprosy. Leprosy in the ancient world was not only a physical disease, it was a living death for you. It was isolation and shame, a constant reminder that something about you was deeply wrong and beyond your ability or anyone else's ability to fix. I think all of us from time to time have carried a version of ourselves of that, here's all this but. The but of our life has many times defined who we are rather than the things that should. We may look pretty good on the outside, just pretty good. I'm not saying we look any better than that. Not pretty and good, but pretty good. But there's a deeper need inside of most of us, right? Something that we can't fix ourselves, but we've always allowed it to define us. I remember when I was growing up, I had freckles all over my face. And it used to disturb me deeply that my brother would call me. Remember Kool-Aid? And you get the packet? They had freckle-faced strawberry. That was my brother's nickname for me, freckle-faced strawberry. And every time we'd go anywhere, everyone would just say to me, "Where'd you get all those freckles?" Thinking that they were really doing me a favor when actually they were making me feel horrible. And finally my mom said to me one day, Timothy, when they say that to you, when they say that to you, just tell them the good Lord gave them to me. And I did, and they started shutting up, so that was good. But anyway, what is it that defines us? The story of Naaman, it's not about skin. It's about how God meets the proud and desperate people and gives them grace. He gives them grace simply because of simple obedience in their life. Simple obedience. This is also a story that shows us the beauty of grace and the danger of rejecting it or even corrupting it. So Naaman's path to healing begins. He doesn't begin with a great prophet or a great king or a great anything. It was just a little Israelite girl who had been taken captive by the Syrians and was now a maid to Naaman's wife. And she says, "Would that my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria. He would cure him of his leprosy." She wasn't bitter. She wasn't angry. But she spoke simple words of hope. Simple. Just a little girl. One statement of simple faith. There wasn't any elaborate theology here. It was just this little girl's quiet confidence that there is a God in Israel who could do something about her master's leprosy, who could do something that no Syrian river could do and that no other God could do. And it's a statement, a simple statement, that set this whole story, this whole event into motion. So Naaman tells his king. The king sends Naaman with a letter and a fortune. Can you imagine all that poundage of silver and gold and clothing? It says, so he went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel. When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you Naaman, my servant, that you may cure him of his leprosy. The king of Israel panics, wouldn't you? He's just picking a fight. He knows I can't cure leprosy. What in the world is wrong with him? He's just picking a fight with us. But Elisha hears about it. How he hears, we don't know, but he hears about it. And he sends a message to the king. Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me, that he may know that there's a prophet in Israel. Why have you torn your clothes? I take that to mean from Elisha, why does this upset you so much? I see that a lot in our world today. People get very upset over, one, things that they can't control, and two, they're really not that bad. But I see Elisha saying to the king, where's your faith? Where's your faith? Don't you know who our God is? King? Send Naaman to me, and he will discover that there really is a prophet in Israel. Not only that, he will know that the only true and living God is the God that Israel worships. And king, you would do well yourself to realize these same truths. God isn't limited by national borders. He's not limited by military might. He's not even limited by the faithfulness of kings or presidents or leaders. God is sovereign over all things. God is sovereign over Israel's enemies. And God is one who really delights in using the weak to show forth his power. He uses those who've been overlooked to accomplish his purpose. It all started with just one little girl's comment. I would say to you, many times God uses us as that little girl. All he's asking us to do is make a simple statement of faith to someone who's going through a difficult time. A simple statement of hope. God uses those simple statements of faith to change people's lives. Speak the hope that you know. Allow God to do the rest. God can use that one comment that is filled with truth and hope to change a person's life. Just that little, simple obedience. Okay, so Naaman goes to Elisha. He arrives with horses and chariots and great expectations. He stands outside Elisha's door, and Elisha sends Gehazi out to see him. Elisha sends his servant out to see him. And Naaman saying, what am I, chopped liver? I expected him to come out here and see me. I expected to have this hoopla of, here's God coming down, and whoosh, my leprosy's gone. And he walks away pouting because Elisha didn't do things the way Naaman had expected. He's furious. He expected all this ceremony and all this drama and all this personal attention. So he leaves. He leaves with the intention of not going to the Jordan, of not doing that simple thing that Elisha told him to do. Somehow it was below him to dip 7 times in the Jordan River when he had plenty of good rivers in Syria. And his pride and his personal preference nearly cost him his healing. Remember that. Pride and personal preference can cost us. Maybe not healing, but knowing the presence of God in our life. But his servants, they came to him gently to confront him gently. And they said to him, Naaman, if Elijah had asked you to do something incredibly difficult, like climb Mount Everest, wouldn't you have done that if you knew that if you climbed Mount Everest, your leprosy would be gone? And finally, he realized how stupid he was being. Naaman humbled himself. And he goes down into the muddy Jordan River and he dips 7 times. I don't know how it happened. I don't know if we went down once and it was a little better and twice it was a little bit more better, or if he went down 6 times and nothing happened. That's what I think. He went down 6 times and nothing happened. He went down the 7th time to come up and boom. Skin as soft as a baby's butt. He was healed. I think that is a living picture of the gospel. We come with our status or maybe our pride. We come with our preferred methods. And we come with our sense of what God ought to do. You ever heard the statement, I thank God? You're wrong. God can do whatever he wants to do. You know, when I say, I don't think God would do it that way, you're just becoming God yourself in making that comment. Even though we come with all that status and pride and our sense of how God ought to do things, isn't it amazing that God meets us there? Free, with his free grace. And he just says to us, wash and be clean. It's not by impressive works that we might do. It's not by the right river or the right choosing or the right kind of worship or anything that we can purchase, but it is just simple, humble trust in the word that God has spoken. Be washed in the blood of Christ and be clean. The gospel's free, absolutely free. But many in our world see it as silly and foolish, just like Naaman saw having to dip in the Jordan as silly and foolish, and he wasn't going to do it. But those who are willing to humbly believe the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. The Jordan was ordinary, and the command was simple. but the healing was complete. You think he was happy he did it? Jesus, later on in the New Testament, points to this story. He says, and there were many lepers, this is in Luke chapter 4, verse 27. There were many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elijah, and none of them were cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian. God's grace, even in the Old Testament, reached further than Israel. It reached all the way to those who were outside of Israel, to anyone actually who would receive God's grace on God's terms. Why was this outsider and not an Israelite healed? Naaman was healed, but not one leper in Israel was healed. I think it's pretty clear from Jesus' words that the people of Israel lacked faith. Jesus made the other comment. Remember, he said, why did God send Elijah to the widow from Zarephath? Why not choose a widow in Israel? Same story, same reason. Because there wasn't a widow nor a leper in Israel who had faith enough to believe what God would do. They had not the faith to do the simplest of obedience. When you think of it, leprosy, it's really a picture of sin. It's defiling, it's isolating, it's progressive, and it's humanly incurable. The only cure is the cleansing God provides through the one who is greater than Elisha. The cure for sin. The world will call it silly or foolish. But just like Naaman, we know that simple obedience brings healing we never even expected. The Father says, simply believe in my Son. Naaman went home to Syria a changed man. He confessed, behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. And he takes a load of soil with him. He tries to give Elisha gifts. Elisha refuses. I think what Elisha is basically saying is God's grace and God's healing cannot be bought. Elisha was not going to allow Naaman in any way to return home thinking that he paid for his healing. We could all learn a lesson on that too. We can't earn our salvation, either before or after we've received it. We always have to continue to place our faith in what Jesus Christ has done for us. Your good works will never bring you a greater status or a greater relationship with God. It is your relationship with God that produces the actions that you do, not vice versa. But notice the change in Naaman. He wants to take that load of soil so he can worship on Israel ground. It's a little wacky. He didn't quite understand everything, a lot like new Christians and some older Christians. They're a little wacky too. But he asks that God would pardon him for having to be with his king and bow in the presence of the idol. And it will appear Elisha said, go in peace. Don't worry about it. We receive God's free gift of salvation. And when we do, we're changed. If you aren't changed, you haven't received it. Our perspective of life changes. Our perspective of God changes. We find ourselves wanting to know more about God, wanting to know Him more. The way we think about things changes. We realize over time that the Holy Spirit really is working within us to conform us to the image of Jesus. We're thinking things and believing things and doing things and being something we've never been before. And then there's Gehazi. he watched Elisha refuse those gifts. And he said, I'm going after that guy, and I'm going to get some of that money. And he goes and he lies. He tells him that there's these two prophets, young prophets that just came, and Elisha needs to take care of them. So he needs 75 pounds of silver, and he needs 2 sets of clothing for them. And Naaman says, absolutely, take twice the amount of silver. And Gehazi takes them, he hides them, and then he lies to Elisha. But God had already revealed to Elisha what Gehazi did. It's a really interesting conversation. When he went into his master, Elijah asked him, where have you been, Gehazi? It reminds me, I can't read that without thinking of the time I was in high school. You guys familiar with Pat Summerall, the sports broadcaster? Well, his son Jay was a friend of mine in high school. So me and Jay and another friend, we skipped school one day and went to Gainesville. I came home that day, and my dad says, so how was school today, Tim? Little did I know, Kmart, where I worked, had called the school asking if I could come in early after school, and they said, he's not here today. So they called home. You know the story. So when my dad said, how was school today? I said, I didn't go, Dad. And my mom was a saint. She said, Banks, did you never skip school? I said, yes. But anyway, I feel like Gehazi was, he's caught. God had already revealed to Elisha. He said, I haven't been anywhere. But Elisha said, don't you realize that I was there in spirit when Naaman stepped down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to receive money and clothing, olive groves and vineyards and sheep and cattle and male and female servants? That's when Gehazi just sort of shrunk. Elijah knew it all. Not only what Gehazi had did, but what he was planning on doing. What was he going to do with that money? Well, he was going to buy olive grove, vineyards, sheep, cattle, male and female servants. Kyle and Delitzsch, the commentary of Old Testament, said, was this the time when so many hypocrites pretend to be prophets from selfishness and avarice and bring the prophetic office into contempt and with unbelievers, for a servant of God to take money and goods from a non-Israelite, that he may acquire property and luxury for himself? No. Elijah pronounces judgment. The leprosy that Naaman had has gone from Naaman to Gehazi and all of his descendants forever. One man goes away healed because of his obedience, while the other man, who should have known what matters the most, walks away with leprosy. Just another Israelite who should have known better, but made the tragic mistake of choosing a substitute for the one true God. While a Gentile discovered what his little servant girl told him: there's a true prophet of God in Israel. So we've seen grace given to a foreign general, a severe judgment on an insider who treated grace as something for personal gain. Can I tell you this? Proximity to the work of God is no guarantee that your heart is close to God. Greed, entitlement, deception can destroy even those who have seen miracles, even those who have been so close to God that they could feel it. Think of Gehazi, all that he had seen and witnessed for Elisha. And here he is. His heart is deceived. Just because you're in the kitchen does not make you a cook. And just because you go to church does not make you a follower of Jesus Christ. You can see it all. But are you truly a follower? Is your heart truly surrendered to him? Naaman, he began proud, He began powerful, and he began diseased. He ended humbled, healed, and worshiping the Lord. The path to that was just simple obedience. Gehazi, on the other hand, he was privileged, and he ended up judged because he tried to turn the beautiful grace of God into personal profit for himself. He valued the things of this world over faithfulness to God. The good news is the same word that was spoken to Naaman: wash and be clean. Jesus Christ has provided the only cleansing that reaches the deepest leprosy in our heart. It's free. It requires humility. It produces true worship. And it leaves no room for the greed that destroys us. If you don't know the Lord, it's free. For those of you who already believe, it is my challenge to us all that we guard our hearts so the grace that healed us never becomes something that we try to exploit. May the desires of this world never overtake our desire for God. May He alone be our heart's desire. Stand with me as we sing.